I never thought that a simple Mother's Day brunch would end up exposing just how far gone my own child was. Jordan stood near my kitchenette, hands in his pockets, suit collar sharp enough to cut. "Mom," he said with a practiced ease, "are you happy with the $5,000 Clara sends every month?" I didn't answer right away. I took my time folding the church bulletin I'd left on the counter, aligning each crease the same way I used to fold his undershirts. I looked up at him, not smiling. "Son, the church is the one keeping me alive these days." Before I could finish that breath, Clara entered, her heels light but deliberate, pearls clutched at the base of her neck like a threat. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice velvet but eyes checking the kitchen corners like an inspector. The room shifted. I don't know how to explain it other than to say something solid left and something cold settled in its place. She carried one of those fancy florist boxes from Peachtree Blooms, all ribboned up like I was meant to swoon over a curated bouquet. I motioned for her to put it down next to the takeout containers they'd brought. Lobster mac and greens in biodegradable trays. I hadn't cooked, wasn't asked to. Clara looked at the tiny dining table. "We'll eat in here?" Her tone held something slick. Pity dressed up as manners. I nodded, still quiet. My mind was still circling the question Jordan had asked. Why $5,000? Why now? I hadn't said a word about money. I hadn't asked for anything. And I sure hadn't seen any $5,000. Not since Clara took over managing things. I took the plastic lid off the greens. Steam rose but didn't warm me. "Y'all want sweet tea?" I asked. Jordan looked relieved by the offer, too relieved. Clara just said, "We're fine." They chewed, praised the food they'd bought, made small talk about midtown traffic and Jordan's firm expanding. But my eyes kept drifting to Clara's purse, soft leather, monogrammed, the kind that cost more than my rent. After they left, I rinsed the dishes, dried my hands, and opened my worn check register. No deposits matching $5,000. Not this month. Not last. Just silence. Zeros and overdraft protection. 3 years earlier, after my hip surgery at Grady, Jordan moved into that high-rise in Midtown, and Clara began handling my bills for ease, just until I got back on my feet. I was still in rehab when she brought it up, white coat thrown over her arm, fake concerned smile hovering like a nurse trying to get consent for a trial pill. She visited my room with a clipboard and a Ziploc bag of my mail, and I was too drugged and sore to question her sudden interest in my overdue gas bill. "We'll just redirect your mail to my office temporarily," she said, smoothing down the hospital blanket as if I were one of her clinic patients. "Just until you're back home and steady." I remember Jordan standing in the corner, quiet, scrolling through his phone, nodding, like it was all standard procedure. He didn't even look up when I asked who would handle my tithes. I don't forget that part. He just said, "We'll take care of it," as if my offering to God was a minor subscription to cancel. The paperwork came fast. One afternoon, she arrived with forms printed out, already highlighted and tabbed. She had a little clipboard with a pen attached to string like I was in some school hallway. "It's just authorization," she said, "so I can call your utilities, reset the online portals, that sort of thing." I signed. The signature came out shaky from pain meds, but I trusted my son. I assumed he'd read it. By the time I was discharged, their apartment was already finished. 23rd floor, 2-bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Piedmont Park. They downsized, they claimed. Clara said it with pride, like giving up a bedroom was some grand sacrifice. Meanwhile, I was trying to climb 4 stairs to my condo without my legs trembling. Within a week, my phone calls with Georgia Power stopped being mine. Clara would text, "Already handled," and I started to feel like a guest in my own affairs. She began forwarding receipts instead of bills. Like I was a donor receiving updates. I told myself it was temporary. That soon I'd be stronger, driving again, rebalancing the checkbook I kept in my top drawer. I told myself this right up until the drawer was empty. I noticed it first with the church bulletins. They stopped coming. No more folded newsletters from Shiloh, no updates on the prayer chain or the community breakfasts. I assumed maybe Sister Langston had dropped me from the list by mistake, so I called the church office. Darlene answered and said gently, "Ms. Harris, we've been mailing them every week. Same as always." That didn't sit right. Then came the missed calls. Not from family or friends, those had already dried up, but from the people who used to know me by name. The teller at the credit union, the pharmacy clerk, Mr. Sims from the co-op board. One by one, familiar voices disappeared, replaced by hold music and automated messages. I tried checking my account online, but the login was incorrect. I tried resetting it, but the confirmation code never came through. I left Jordan 2 voicemails. Clara, 4 texts. The only response was a thumbs up emoji and a, "You're good." I wasn't. It all came to a head when I went to renew my MARTA discount card at the senior center. The clerk behind the plexiglass asked me to verify my mailing address. I recited it. East Point, same place I'd lived for 16 years. She frowned, clicked around, then turned the screen toward me. "Isn't this you?" she asked. I stared at the line. Mailing address, 310 Lenox Parkway, Suite 1200. Buckhead. I knew that address. Clara's clinic. Her integrative wellness office with the eucalyptus candles and branded water bottles. I walked out with my papers unfinished. Didn't even wait for my bus transfer. I sat on the stone bench by the parking lot and dialed the credit union. After 10 minutes on hold, someone finally answered. When I gave my account number and asked to confirm the address on file, she hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm only allowed to discuss account details with the listed contact." "Who is the listed contact?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. The silence that followed was answer enough. I hung up and sat there, knees aching, sun burning the side of my face, wondering when exactly I had become a ghost with perfect credit. A week after that polished Mother's Day brunch, I stood in the Kroger checkout line with a basket of simple things: eggs, oatmeal, coffee, and 1 bag of frozen spinach. The total came to $14.82. I slid my card into the reader, expecting the usual chirp, but instead came the hollow beep of denial. The cashier looked at me kindly, the kind of pitying glance reserved for elders fumbling coupons. "You want to try again, baby?" I did. Twice. "Same beep?" She waited while I opened my worn wallet, flipping through receipts like old prayers. I handed her another card, the backup I kept for emergencies, the one tied to the same account. Declined again. I told her I'd step aside. Packed my groceries back into the basket and walked to the nearest bench by the exit, the hum of scanners and laughter behind me sounding like another world. I dialed the credit union, my fingers shaking only from anger. After 2 transfers, a woman named Lila came on the line. Her tone was practiced softness, the kind that tries to brace you before a fall. I gave her my account number and birth date. I told her I was at the grocery store and my card wasn't working. She went quiet for a moment, keys clicking faintly. "Miss Harris," she said carefully, "your account is currently frozen." "Frozen by who?" I asked. She hesitated. "It says here, the primary account holder requested the freeze for security." My voice tightened. "I am the account holder." More typing, more silence. "It appears there was a power of attorney filed last year, giving authority to a Ms. Clara Bell." The rest of the sentence blurred. I remember gripping the phone so tight my palm ached. People were moving around me. Someone pushing a squeaky cart, a child crying for candy, but it all faded into static. "Can you unfreeze it?" I asked. "I'm afraid not, ma'am. Only the primary or authorized agent can make that change." I thanked her because old habits die slow. Then I hung up, stood, and left the basket where it sat. The spinach melted before I reached the parking lot. That same evening, I called Deacon Sylvester from my landline, the one still mounted in the hallway, still reliable when the cell tower flickers. I told him I needed help. Not money, not groceries, not prayer, but real help, the kind with teeth. He didn't ask questions, just said, "You need to talk to Ms. Laura Brooks. I'll text you her number." Second Chance Atlanta operated out of the back annex of the church, behind the choir rehearsal room, past the water-stained bulletin board no one updated anymore. Laura met me there 2 days later, exactly at 10 a.m., holding a clipboard, a pen, and a steaming cup of ginger tea. She had on a navy blue pantsuit and sensible shoes, and she didn't lead with sympathy. She led with a question, "How far back do you keep your original statements?" I opened my tote bag and handed her a folder thick with bank printouts, electric bills, insurance stubs, all organized by month with handwritten notes in the margins. She flipped through them silently, pausing every few pages to highlight a number or flag a missing piece. Her eyes moved fast, but her voice stayed calm. "This is good. It gives us a trail." I told her about the Kroger card decline, about the power of attorney I hadn't read, the redirected mail, the address change, the vanished Shiloh bulletins. I tried not to let it sound like a sob story, though parts of it shamed me more than I could admit. She listened without interruption, just nodding every so often and jotting quick notes. "You're not the first," she said finally, "and you're not powerless. But we're going to need to move carefully, document everything, and start with access. First priority is seeing where the money's going and who authorized what." She had me sign an authorization so she could pull my credit report and file a third-party inquiry at the credit union. She made a photocopy of my ID, my real one, not the version Clara had used, and stapled it to the front of her folder. "Drink the tea," she said, smiling just a little. "We're going to wake some people up." It took Laura less than 3 days. She called me on a Wednesday morning, voice steady but firm. "Can you come in today? Bring any paperwork you have from 22, especially anything with your signature." By noon, I was back in the annex. Same room, same clipboard, but this time her laptop was open, and the screen showed a series of bank statements that didn't come from my drawer. These were pulled using her temporary inquiry access. She turned the screen so I could see clearly. "This is the transaction history on your savings account, the one ending in 4,481. I recognized the last 4 digits. That was the account I opened after my husband passed, the one I kept separate, quiet, or so I thought. There's been an automatic transfer," she said, pointing to a line that repeated every month. $3,000 on the 4th of each month, going straight to something called Luxury Property LLC. It's been active since February of last year. I blinked at the name. I'd never heard of it. It sounded like one of those fake companies in late-night crime documentaries. Laura clicked into the transfer details and pulled up the account it was tied to. Mine. My savings. "Here's the form authorizing the auto draft," she said. Then she paused before adding, "It's backed by a power of attorney on file with your bank, submitted in April 2022. She handed me a printed copy. At the bottom, there it was, my name, scrawled in pen, but something looked off. The signature looped too wide, too smooth. I stared at the A in Harris. I never curl mine like that. "Did you sign this?" Laura asked quietly. I studied the page. The rest of the information was accurate. My birth date, address, account numbers. But the handwriting felt rehearsed. "She took my ID," I said slowly. "Said she needed to update insurance paperwork. Around that time. Maybe March." Laura gave a single nod and placed the form into a labeled folder marked Potential Fraud. "She used your identification and created an authorization you didn't knowingly sign? That's financial exploitation." And just like that, the polite word help Clara had used became what it really was: theft. I went home that afternoon and pulled out the worn manila envelope where I kept my older statements, the ones Clara never touched. I laid them out across the table, marched through November of 2021, and flipped through each one page by page until I found a copy of a form I'd signed myself to authorize a temporary transfer after my surgery. The signature was clean, familiar. My A in Alberta leaned slightly to the left, sharp at the top, no unnecessary curves. I wrote it that way because it had always felt like a stand, something solid. I held it next to the power of attorney Laura had printed and handed me, the one supposedly from 2022. The signature on that one had a wide, fancy swoop in the A, like someone had practiced making it look expensive. It mimicked my hand but didn't carry my weight. I stared at it until my eyes watered. Not from sadness, but from the sick heat of being used. My name had always meant something. Not just to me, but to the bank teller who called me Miss Alberta, to the usher who reserved my seat at Shiloh, to my neighbors who knew that even when my knees hurt, I still swept the hallway. And now it was being used like a spare key. The next morning, I searched the kitchen drawer Clara had organized during one of her early visits. At the bottom, under expired coupons and a broken pen, I found the copy of my driver's license she had photocopied. She said it was for insurance updates while I was recovering. It had the faint blue lines from the copier still visible, and I remembered how quickly she'd swept it away afterward. I called Laura and told her what I found. "Photocopy of your ID?" she said, voice tightening. "That may be how she verified your identity with the bank. That, plus the forged signature, that's a chain of custody issue. We're building a case now." I scanned the signature copy and sent it over. Then I sat at the table, turned off every light except the one above me, and went through every envelope in that manila folder, circling every curve and every A. If she was going to forge me, she should have paid more attention. I waited until Sunday afternoon to call her. I knew Jordan would be at the gym or at brunch with one of his college friends, and Clara liked to play housekeeper around noon, dusting surfaces no one touched, and stacking coasters like trophies. She answered on the second ring, her voice all syrup and control. "Hi, Alberta," she said, stretching my name like it belonged to her. I didn't bother with small talk. "Clara, I need you to explain something to me. There's a $3,000 transfer coming out of my savings every month. It's going to something called Luxury Property LLC. I never authorized that." She paused just long enough for me to hear the page turning in her mind. "Oh, that," she said, laughing lightly. "It's just how we manage the Midtown place. You're technically listed for tax purposes. Don't worry, it's all above board. I handle everything so you don't have to worry. You've been using my account," I said, flat, "without my consent. You gave me power of attorney," she replied, voice turning cool but still polite. "Remember? After your surgery, you signed the papers. I signed what you put in front of me while I was on pain medication, barely able to sit up. That's not consent, Clara. That's coercion." Her tone changed then. Not angry, not guilty, just bored, like she was done pretending. "Look, I've always done what's best for the family. You're cared for, your bills are handled, and Jordan doesn't have to worry. Isn't that what you wanted?" "No," I said, and I made sure my voice didn't shake. "I wanted respect. I wanted to retire with dignity, not have my name attached to properties I don't live in and money I can't touch." "Well," she said, snapping the word like gum, "I can't talk now. I have a client. We'll revisit this when you've calmed down." And just like that, she hung up. I sat there holding the phone to my ear even after the line went dead, letting the silence fill up the kitchen. No apology, no denial, just confirmation, straight from her mouth, that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice, and she made it without blinking. Laura didn't wait a full week. She called that Friday with a tone that didn't waste time. "You need to come in. There's more." Her office in the annex smelled faintly of ginger and toner. She had 3 printouts spread across the folding table when I arrived, each one labeled, stapled, and underlined. She pulled a chair out for me, but I didn't sit right away. "The money going to Luxury Property LLC," she said. "It's funding a Midtown loft. Address is on Juniper Street. 1 bedroom, 2 baths, newly remodeled. Deed shows co-ownership between you and an entity called Clara Belle Investments." My knees buckled just enough to make me sit. "My name's on the deed?" I asked, not because I didn't believe her, but because I needed to hear it said out loud. My name, legally tied to property I'd never seen, paid for by money I never released. Laura nodded. "You're on paper, but there's no indication you were involved in the purchase. No emails, no signatures from your end on the mortgage. She used your POA again, filed everything through an online real estate portal, signed digitally using your name." I sat still, trying to understand the scale. Not just theft, but structure, strategy. A system Clara had built using my name like scaffolding. Laura wasn't finished. "And there's this," she said, sliding a statement across the table. "An American Express card I didn't know existed. Under my name. $18,000 in purchases. Gucci, Saks, spa packages, private driver services. Nearly every charge came from Phipps Plaza or stores within a 5-mile radius of their condo." "I never opened an Amex account," I said. already knowing how this went. She nodded again. She used the same identification, same POA documentation, but she marked it as a caregiver account. That's how she got around the verification call. I picked up the statement and turned it over like I could erase it from the back. Clara had been building a life. Clothes, credit, property, all on top of mine like I was bedrock. Except bedrock is supposed to be unmovable. And I was very much shaking now. Laura tapped the table lightly. She's not just exploiting you. She's laundering legitimacy through your good name. And now we had proof. I took a MARTA bus to the Fulton County Clerk's office the following Monday. I didn't tell Laura. I wanted to do this one thing myself. It was the last sliver of control I could still reach for, without handing over my dignity like a ticket at the window. The clerk behind the counter wore readers and a silver chain around her neck. When I gave her my name and former address on Joseph E. Boone, she typed quickly, "No questions. You'll want property records and deed transfers," she said. One moment. She came back with a manila folder thin enough to insult the 22 years I spent in that house. I used to paint the trim every Easter weekend. I resealed the windows myself one winter when the utilities spiked. That house knew my steps better than any church pew. The woman slid the folder to me. "Here's the quitclaim deed," she said, tapping a page. "Transfer recorded March 18, 2022. The date stopped me. That was 1 week, exactly 1 week, after I came home from Grady, still shuffling from room to room with that ugly gray walker they give you when your insurance won't cover better. The document was notarized. My name printed, her name printed, but the signature didn't belong to me. Same forged swoop in the A, same fraud in black ink. I turned to the second page and saw the recipient, Bell Property Holdings. Clara again, this time under a different mask. I asked the clerk what it would take to challenge a deed. She handed me a packet with highlighted fields and a post-it note on top that read, "Affidavit of fraud." She said I'd need to file a claim, attach proof, maybe go to mediation before it moved to court. The language was cold, procedural. I thanked her anyway, took the folder, and walked outside where the city noise didn't sound so distant anymore. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, but something inside me sat up straight. That house wasn't just sold out from under me, it was stolen while I was still limping around inside it. She didn't even wait for me to stand all the way back up. 3 days after I held that forged deed in my hands, the mail arrived later than usual. I was making tea when I heard the slot clink. Just one envelope slid through, thick, official-looking, no return address. I opened it without thinking. Inside was a notice from Bell Property Holdings, formatted like a form letter, cold as concrete. You are hereby given notice to vacate the premises located at 1370 Joseph E. Boone Boulevard, Atlanta, Georgia. This property is classified as non-owner occupied. You have 30 days from receipt of this notice to remove all personal belongings and surrender the premises. My name wasn't even listed at the top, just current occupant. No greeting, no acknowledgement, no trace of the woman who had once kissed my cheek on Christmas morning and called me mama. Just a legal shove out the door of the home. I scrubbed, painted, defended, and paid off without missing a mortgage date, even when Harold passed and the pension got tight. I read it again. Slower this time. There, at the bottom, was Clara's signature, this time real. No forged swoops or copied letters. Just a quick, businesslike C. Bell next to her company title. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks anymore. Why would she? She had the deed, the power of attorney, and control of my money. She didn't need my cooperation now, just my silence. I set the paper down and looked around the condo I'd been renting since the surgery. Half my things still boxed, church hat stacked on the closet shelf, mail unopened on the end table. Nothing about this place said home, not like my house did. Not like that porch Jordan used to fall asleep on as a boy during summer storms. That house had roots, and this condo was a storage unit with plumbing. I took a photo of the eviction notice and sent it to Laura with one sentence. She mailed this to my current address. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Keep the envelope. Postmark proves she knows you're not living there. That makes it retaliatory. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope with the torn edge still jagged, and placed it under the church bulletin on my counter. I wasn't going anywhere. I sat in the side chapel at Shiloh that Sunday, not because there was a service, but because I needed silence where silence still meant something. The main sanctuary echoed too much now, full of programs and announcements and shiny faces with nowhere to look when you said the word betrayal. But the side chapel was plain. No choir, no microphone, just 12 pews and a wooden cross that hadn't been polished in years. I didn't pray. I didn't cry either. I sat with my palms open on my knees like I was still waiting to receive something. Maybe respect, maybe clarity, maybe just the truth. But nothing came. Just the plain weight of what had already been taken. My house, my name, my place at the table. Clara hadn't just stolen money. She'd erased me. Little by little, with forms and signatures and sealed envelopes, she turned me from mother to liability, from woman to task. When the clock hit 11:42, I stood up and walked to the vestibule. The wall had a phone for emergencies and a rack of outreach pamphlets. I didn't need scripture. I needed strategy. I scrolled to Laura's name and pressed call. She picked up quick, no surprise in her voice. "You got it?" She sent the notice to my condo. I said, "Not the house. She knows I haven't lived there in over a year." "That's retaliatory," Laura confirmed. "It's also grounds. You ready to push back?" I looked at the narrow window above the chapel door. The light coming through didn't change anything, but it let me see the dust. "It's time," I said. "We move." Laura didn't waste words. "I'll start the prep. First mediation request goes out Monday morning. We do it on your turf, not hers." I hung up and walked down the front steps of Shiloh without looking back. I didn't need a sign or a hymn. I had what I needed now: proof, support, and one last shred of nerve that hadn't been touched. She thought I'd go quiet. She forgot who taught Jordan to speak. Laura drafted the letter that same day. She used crisp language, measured, exact, like a scalpel. Request for mediation regarding financial exploitation and property misuse. She listed the parties involved and cited the relevant codes, including elder protection statutes and financial abuse guidelines under Georgia law. It wasn't theatrical, but it read like a warning shot. She sent it certified mail to Clara's clinic, her attorney of record, and to Jordan's office at that firm in Midtown, where he apparently still had time to send holiday cards, but none to answer mine. We chose the First Community Credit Union boardroom as the location. Neutral ground, but with glass walls and clean floors. Somewhere Clara would have to keep her voice sweet and her heels silent. Laura handled the scheduling, locking in the date. Wednesday, 10 a.m. sharp, 2 weeks from the mailing. I picked my witness, Pastor Jerome. He wasn't loud or judgmental. He'd lost his mother to a similar situation. Niece with a signature stamp and a gambling problem. I didn't need a sermon. I needed someone who knew what betrayal looked like under legal lighting. When I asked him, he just nodded and said, "I'll be there, in a dark suit and a clear mind. Ms. Price from Adult Protective Services confirmed 3 days later she would attend as a state observer, not an advocate." "I'll be listening," she said over the phone. "And if what you're describing holds, we escalate." That was all I needed. Someone to witness the pattern. Jordan tried to call me once, just once. It was a short message, rushed and rehearsed. "Hey, Mom, Clara mentioned something about a meeting. Just let me know if you want to talk before then." I didn't reply. If he had questions, he could bring them to the table like everyone else. Laura and I spent the days leading up gathering receipts, timelines, and notarized comparisons. We included the forged POA, the wire transfer records, the property deed, the Amex charges. She organized everything into a blue folder labeled receipts. Not evidence, not allegations, just plain truth, documented and time-stamped. I didn't practice what I would say. I just kept one phrase close. "You don't get to erase me and still eat at my table." Now they'd have to sit across from it. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked into the glass-walled conference room at First Community Credit Union, wearing a navy skirt suit I hadn't put on in years. The hem sat just below my knee, and the buttons took longer to fasten than I remembered, but it fit. I brought no purse, just the blue receipts folder and a pen that clicked clean. Laura walked beside me, already calm, already 5 steps ahead. Clara and Jordan were seated on the far side of the long table. She wore a cream blouse with cuffs that looked too tight around the wrists. Jordan didn't meet my eye. His phone sat face down, a silent prop. A man in a trim suit I didn't recognize sat to Clara's left. Her attorney and Ms. Price from APS had taken the seat closest to the door, yellow legal pad ready. Laura opened. No emotion, no drama. Just dates, account numbers, a clear record of every withdrawal, every transfer, every form signed under the guise of care. I waited until she was done laying the framework before sliding the folder across the polished table. It landed right in front of Clara. She stared at it, but didn't open it. Her lawyer reached for it instead. Inside were the 3 core items. A side-by-side signature comparison showing the forged power of attorney next to verified originals, a highlighted log of bank transactions, $3,000, like clockwork, pulled monthly for a property I'd never seen, and the statement from American Express listing spa services and designer boutiques billed under my name. I asked for none of this, I said plainly. My voice didn't shake. I didn't authorize a luxury condo, or a credit line, or the transfer of my house. I was recovering from surgery when those forms were filed. Clara tilted her head and said nothing. Her lawyer cleared his throat. We'd like time to review the documents. Laura didn't blink. You had that. This is formal mediation. These items were shared in the letter 2 weeks ago. I looked at Jordan then, waiting to see if he'd say anything. Explain, defend, apologize. But he just adjusted his cufflink and looked past me, as if this was something happening to someone else. That silence said everything. I didn't flinch. Laura had warned me. Say it all once, say it clearly, then stop talking. So I did. I pointed to the forged power of attorney first, the one with the signature she'd faked, using a copy of my ID and muscle memory that didn't belong to her. This was never mine, I said, tapping the curved. Compare it to every signature I've made since 2004. You'll see the difference. Then I laid out the quitclaim deed, dated 1 week after I came home from the hospital, still on painkillers, still learning how to climb stairs again. She filed this while I was recovering. No disclosure, no conversation, just took the house I lived in for over 2 decades. Next came the transfers. Automatic withdrawals from my savings to an LLC I never heard of, connected to a condo I never saw. She used me to fund her property portfolio. Every dollar removed was disguised as support, I said, but nothing came back. Laura flipped to the final exhibit. The Amex charges, lined up in neat columns, each with location, date, and amount. Designer labels, private drivers, $2,000 in boutique candles. I said nothing. The paper spoke louder. Clara finally reached for the folder, but didn't touch the documents. Instead, she looked at me with that same shallow smile she used at church picnics, the one that curled without reaching her eyes. We've always managed things efficiently. I thought you were comfortable. Laura stepped in, cool as glass. You managed it by violating financial control, misrepresenting consent, and using elder access protections for personal enrichment. Clara blinked once, but still said nothing. Miss Price, quiet until now, cleared her throat and leaned forward. Mrs. Bell, she began, did you at any point inform Miss Harris she was signing away her primary residence? That she would not retain control of her assets? Clara's lips parted, but the words jammed up behind her teeth. That's when Pastor Jerome, who had said nothing since the moment he sat down, leaned in and spoke without raising his voice. This ain't the first time she's done this to one of our elders. The room went still. Not another breath moved until the lawyer lowered his pen. Clara's face didn't twitch, but her lawyer shifted in his seat. Pastor Jerome's words hadn't come loud, but they landed heavy. Everyone at the table felt it. The line that had just been drawn. Not just a family matter now. Not just a misunderstanding with paperwork. It was a pattern, and the room knew it. Miss Price leaned forward, her pen still, voice steady. I need to ask clearly for the record. Have you engaged in similar financial arrangements with other elderly individuals, clients, relatives, or otherwise? Clara's mouth opened like she might deny it, but something in her eyes faltered, just for a second. Not guilt, but calculation. She glanced sideways at her lawyer, then at Jordan, who still hadn't said a word. He kept his eyes down, studying the pattern in the grain of the table, like it held the answer to a question he didn't want to be asked. Her attorney spoke instead. Ms. Bell is willing to discuss a full reversal of the transactions in question, pending mutual agreement, no admission of wrongdoing. He said it like it was generous, like the stolen years and dignity could be wiped away with a settlement line. Laura didn't miss a beat. Full restitution includes the reversal of the quitclaim deed, return of all funds withdrawn from Miss Harris's accounts, closure of the Amex in her name, and an affidavit voiding the POA filed in 2022. She slid a typed list across the table. We're not negotiating dignity. Clara didn't look at the list. She crossed her arms. But her lawyer picked it up, reading each line with growing unease. When he reached the final bullet, written apology to be submitted as part of settlement agreement, he sighed. Will advise acceptance. A drawn-out legal proceeding would not benefit anyone here. That was the first time Jordan looked up. Not at me. At Laura. Does this mean we won't press criminal charges? He asked, voice low. Laura didn't smile. That depends on your client's cooperation. But Adult Protective Services is now involved, and APS has its own timeline. I looked across the table at my son, the boy I'd raised to return a neighbor's rake and always call his elders Miss or Mister. He looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him, and he didn't say another word. The agreement was signed 4 days later in a downtown office suite with frosted glass and leather chairs that squeaked when you shifted wrong. Clara came with a different lawyer this time. Older, quieter, no pocket square or fake charm. She didn't speak during the signing, just nodded when asked if she understood each clause. Gone was the tone of control, the lilt of fake concern. She looked stripped down, like the edges had worn off. The reversal package was complete. Laura made sure of it. The quitclaim deed was nullified and filed back with the county under my name alone. My house, the one with the peeling porch rails and creaky second step, was mine again in writing. The bank provided confirmation that all misdirected funds, totaling $57,000, had been returned to my primary savings. The Amex account was closed, wiped from my credit report, with a formal statement from the issuer acknowledging identity misuse. And the power of attorney? Revoked, stamped, and archived with a notarized affidavit that read, executed under misleading conditions, without informed consent. Laura reviewed every page twice before handing me the final copy. This is legal closure, she said, but what happens next is still yours to decide. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes carried something steadier than relief. Recognition. The last item was the written apology. Clara had tried to get her attorney to remove it, then water it down. But Laura stood firm. 2 paragraphs, signed, on official letterhead. I read it slowly when it came. It was dry, lifeless, no warmth, no ownership. Just phrases like regret the misunderstanding and never intended harm. But it didn't matter. Her signature at the bottom was real this time. That was enough. APS agreed to close their active case pending any future violation, but Ms. Price reminded us that Clara's name would remain flagged in their internal system. If she ever applies to act as financial representative again, she said, this file comes up first. I kept a copy of every signed page in a red accordion folder labeled Restoration. Not revenge, not even justice, just what was stolen, returned. Jordan didn't call. Not after the mediation, not after the filings. That silence stung, but I let it stay. I wasn't chasing apologies anymore. I'd reclaimed what mattered. By August, the deed was back in my name. I held the stamped copy in my hands the way some women hold a newborn, carefully, like it might still vanish if I blinked too long. The courthouse seal sat in the bottom left corner, dry and permanent. Laura walked with me to file it in person, Just to be sure, it went straight to the right desk. No more middlemen. No more signatures I didn't recognize. The Amex account had been scrubbed. They sent me a letter confirming all charges were dismissed and that my credit report reflected no liability due to confirmed identity misuse. I didn't bother trying to understand the score. They restored it, and that was enough. I'd never bought a thing from Saks, but I had paid for every inch of my freedom. Clara's access was fully revoked. The bank locked her out of every linked account. Her name was removed from all communication preferences, digital and paper. No more forwarded statements. No more monthly withdrawals to shell companies with luxury in the title. The woman who once walked through my home pointing at things she thought were outdated couldn't even touch my records now. On the second Tuesday of the month, Laura came by with a new mailbox key. She handed it over without ceremony, but the tag on the keychain caught my breath. Gold-plated, small, with one word engraved, yours. Inside was a folded note. Dignity doesn't retire. It read, T. I put it in the top drawer next to my check register, not to reread, but to keep. That Sunday at Shiloh, I sat in my usual pew, 4th row from the front, aisle seat. I wore the soft blue suit I used to save for Easter. Pastor Jerome nodded when he saw me. He didn't say a word during service, just let the choir do their part and let the gospel speak where it needed to. Afterward, 2 women I hadn't seen in months came over to hug me. One whispered, I heard what she did. You didn't deserve that. The other pressed a folded $20 into my hand, said, For your garden, Ms. Alberta. The one you're getting back. I didn't correct her. I was already planning the first thing I'd plant.